Hello and welcome to our podcast, Keep It Science. I'm Dr. Elisabeth Kugler, a biomedical image analyst and science artist, director of Zeke's Art for Geeks, and your host of today's Keep It Science episode, Keep It Stress-Free. Today we're talking about something that probably all of us have experienced at one point or another, which is stress. Stress, not by its physical definition, but stress as emotional or mental strain. So today we will explore what is stress, how can we cope with it, and how can we establish habits that prevent it from happening. And today I'm joined by two wonderful guests, Giselle Monbiot and Tim Gaunt. So Giselle, maybe introduce yourself to our listeners today.
Hello everyone, I'm Giselle Monbiot. I'm thrilled to be joining you today. My focus at gisellemonbiot.com revolves around unravelling the science of stress and the impact it has on our lives. Through our core connections, I'm dedicated to enhancing well-being and helping people understand how to manage stress effectively. I'm excited to dive into the world of stress with you and Tim and explore how correctly managing stress is crucial, especially during big life and career changes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today, Giselle, with us. Tim, maybe introduce yourself as well to our guests.
Right. So, hi, my name's Tim Gaunt. I'm the CIO of Acorn Scientific Marketing. I am a biochemist, a chartered biologist, and a nutrition expert with over 35 years experience in the food supplement industry, where I've been a writer, a trainer, broadcaster, and my work with the company that I worked for 32 years took me all around the world. I'm really looking forward to joining you.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you both here today. And each one of you obviously represents very different viewpoints. I'm really excited to talk with you about stress. But before we kind of dive into the topic, I just wanted to dig a little bit deeper into your introduction. So, Giselle, you mentioned the CORE acronym. Could you explain to us what that means?
Yeah, so for many, many years, I have been studying how we can, what's the most important things for us to be focusing on. And a lot of people always say, well, it's just this one thing. But actually, it's many, many factors that we need to be able to deal with our stress, increase our well-being. And the core is so you have clarity, openness, resilience, and energy. So look at how we can care for our bodies, the sensations that our bodies might be expressing to us. And especially when it comes to stress, that focus on how our nervous system is responding. The inner self is very much looking at our belief patterns, and things like meditation. I'm a great advocate for cold showers. All of these things can really help with calming our inner self down. But then also the importance about relationships, how we can develop and how the relational impacts that we have, how that helps us and those around us.
They're fantastic points. Thank you. And I think it's also important, like you mentioned, it's not just about the kind of self, but also the relations around. So I'm really excited to talk with you about this in a few minutes. But before we talk about stress, again, Tim, you also mentioned a current career change, going to marketing at Acorn Scientific Marketing. And also you have a fantastic LinkedIn blog. And I would love if you could maybe talk about this as well.
Yeah, sure. It's one of the things that I decided when I left my previous company after 32 years doing the technical support, new product development, those type of aspects of the business, that I wanted to keep that information flow going in some way. So I'd always had LinkedIn and used it for about 10 years, but not really used it properly. Never really posted. And then all of a sudden I thought, this is a great platform to continue to get that message out there, to help people if possible. That's what I love to do, and just to share the information that I've gained in all those years working for a food supplement company. So that was why I went about the LinkedIn process, and the whole moving to Acorn Scientific Marketing was a really interesting one because my son is also a scientist. We'd enjoyed spending time together and talking science, and he kept saying, "You want to come and join me? Do you want to come and join me in the business?" And at the time I was like, I don't know, I've been doing this job for a long time, I'm very comfortable here and I don't really know anything about marketing. And he said, what do you think you've been doing for 32 years in a health food business? You've been marketing your products. And when I think about it, that's what I was doing. I was talking to people about the products, and it might not fit my definition of marketing, but it is marketing. So it's been a really interesting change in careers. and certainly not a more stressful one. They say changing career is supposed to be quite stressful. Well, this is actually quite enjoyable. So, and never got to do things like this, which is obviously something that's new for me as well.
That's so great to hear. And yeah, every conversation is like a sales or marketing conversation.
Yes.
But it's great that you work with your family. I've previously also worked with my family, with their companies. And I think it's very nice to have that experience together. And now we talk a little bit more about, stress, mental health, and how all of this kind of weaves into science careers. And before we start, I do have some stress stats. So we know that job stress is estimated to cost the United Kingdom industry more than £28.3 billion due to absences, reduced productivity and accidents. Over 5 hours of work are lost every single week due to employees thinking about their stressors. That really highlights that stress is not only kind of a burden for the individual, but really a burden for the economy as a whole. So before we start, I would love to hear from Tim. If you could tell us a little bit more about stress and the effects on the body.
We describe stress as what happens when we go into fight or flight mode. So it's a biological state that evolved to help us flee from predators or fight our way out of a dangerous situation. So the primitive hunter-gatherer came across a saber-toothed tiger, for instance, either decided to fight it or run like mad and get out of the way. So that's the basic mechanism. And when we experience stress, our bodies release hormones, things like adrenaline or epinephrine, as it's also known, cortisol and norepinephrine. And these hormones are designed to help us deal with stressful situations by A, increasing our heart rate, B, increasing the blood pressure, and C, increasing your blood sugar levels. That's all designed to speed up that process of running or fighting. It's fine in short, sharp bursts, and in those primitive societies, that will be fine. Today's society, we don't have the same triggers that led to that evolution of the mechanism, but instead, we're rather more familiar with constant worry and anxiety and the frequent rush to complete all those tasks that are expected of us on a daily basis. So that creates a prolonged state of what was originally fight or flight, but really now is known as modern-day stress. So stress isn't just a state of psychological turmoil, it has a physical impact on our health. So those blood sugar and blood pressure increases mean we're actually alert even though we're exhausted. We can't get that restful night's sleep, which is really, really important to us, despite the fact that we're tired. Stress body diverts blood from what it sees as not essential functions to support fight or flight, and consequently, our digestion becomes compromised. And our immune system so weak that we pick up one ailment after another. And prolonged periods of stress, we see people constantly poorly, or so it seems. They can't get over one bug.
Yeah, they're such important points. It's also, this famous, as soon as you're on holiday, you get ill, right? Because the stress just falls off.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then we'll talk with you later a little bit more about sleep and the immune system, if that's all right, because I'm really interested in that. But for now, I would like to kind of also ask you a little bit, could you be a little bit more specific about, stressors and how they're like, or what are the common kind of stressors in scientific professions?
Yeah. Obviously, they talk about stressful careers and science careers aren't necessarily the most stressful unless you maybe chose something like teaching career in sciences. And they say that the most stressful career is apparently teaching inner city schools. And science teachers obviously will be part of that. So, however, most scientists will certainly experience considerable stress, especially early in their careers when you want to be successful and you're making those proposals. If you don't get a successful proposal or your research isn't productive enough, that can certainly bring that career to a premature end. So the stress is on to succeed from a very early age. It's also common for those working in scientific fields to experience the stress of the deadline. I know I've had that throughout my career. Deadlines were there. You had to try and meet them. You have to try and find a way of coping with those deadlines. But we also see stressors in the form of things like communication, constant calls, emails, messages via that plethora of different media applications. They all demand time from our daily routine, and they want an immediate response, people as well. And I think really, unfortunately, we are very easily contactable these days. There are some advantages to that, but there are also some disadvantages when it comes to stress. So everyone seems to want a piece of you all the time. And the price of that is increased stress.
Oh, yeah, I think we all feel that so much. Absolutely. So it's good to sometimes just turn off the phone, right? And not be contactable. Now that we've had a little bit about, stress and stresses in the scientific professions, Giselle, I would love if you could talk with us a little bit more about, strategies for how we can actually manage stress.
Oh, yeah, of course. One of my favourite subjects. First and foremost, and this is obviously not something that can be covered in this, but if you can't manage your stress, sometimes it's because you need some extra help with it. Sometimes stress is kind of your body telling you that there is some unresolved challenges going on inside of you. So to actually reach out to someone who can help you through that is always a good idea. There are certain things that we can really do for ourselves on a daily basis, which is fantastic. So meditation, having a regular meditation practice, a good way to keep you so much calmer. And interestingly enough, I've only recently managed to keep a daily routine in this myself. And I'm noticing I get up 15 minutes earlier every morning. I do at least 15 minutes when I wake up, a minimum of 15 minutes before I go to bed. And my stress levels have reduced exponentially. It's absolutely phenomenal. So even if you just do 10 minutes a day, just focusing in your body, focusing in your breath, it could be a very, very simple one that you do. There are loads of free meditation apps if you feel that you need to have a guided meditation to go alongside. What I'm finding now with focusing meditation is I'm always seeing it like a friend. That time when you get stressed and kind of looking out for something to sort you out. I now think, I'm just going to take 15 minutes out. I'm going to focus on my breath. And it's like you've got your own friend hanging around with you at all times. So I really recommend that. I have to mention this because I'm a big advocate for this, and that's cold exposure. So this is having cold showers, ice baths, doing wild swimming. What this does is it puts the body in high stress response, which bizarrely, by doing that, it activates the parasympathetic part of the nervous system, which then calms you down. It gives you an amazing flush of dopamine. And dopamine is that feel-good hormone, and it stays with you. So you feel more upbeat, you feel more motivated. It is quite remarkable. So actually mixing the meditation and cold exposure together can be quite a life-changing experience. More gentle things you could do is go out into nature. So nature has been really shown to calm your nervous system down. And mindfully being in nature, become aware of it, see it, really become conscious of the sensations within yourself as you connect into nature. And you will naturally just find that you slow down and feel calmer. And if you don't have a beautiful park by you, that's okay. Just by focusing on a nearby tree, even just watching bees fly about can have exactly the same impact. Exercise. So exercising your body regularly is a great de-stressor. So you get more endorphins going in your body, which make you feel better. If you can exercise in nature and do it with your friends, then you're going to be ticking loads of boxes. And that's going to be a really wonderful way to reduce stress.
Giselle, that was absolutely amazing. I think also with relation to the things that you mentioned, like, for example, breath, there's this amazing book by James Nestor, which I just recently read. It was really life-changing, and I am due to read it again. It's about breath and how to breathe and how breath really impacts us on a daily kind of, basis, which is a beautiful book. And the other book is by Wim Hof, which is also related to your cold exposure, right? So it is challenging, yes.
But yeah, the first thing that goes when we're anxious is our breathing. The first thing that happens is our breathing becomes shallow and it becomes high up. So even just by doing that slight change of deepening your breath, slowing it down, instead of doing it from your upper chest, do it from your solar plexus and really just deepen it. There's going to be an instant shift within your nervous system at that point.
Yeah, they're such good points. And I think when we work in offices, it often obviously kind of also impacts how we breathe because you sit down all day. And then as soon as you stand up, you suddenly realize that you're breathing wrong all day. And that can't be healthy, like for longer
absolutely.
durations.
And it has a huge impact on our stress response just by how we're breathing and how we're sitting. You know, even if we're the difference in how we feel, if we're just slumped forward and our shoulders down, even doing it now, I immediately just think, I feel, And then you sit up and you put your shoulders back and your chest back, and suddenly, you know, life feels so much better. So our posture has a huge impact as well.
Yeah, and I think especially nowadays with people just sitting in front of computers for like 8 hours straight, posture is such an important point.
Yeah,
I'm guilty.
Is everyone sitting up a bit more straight now?
Yes. I'm like, immediately. Oh, yeah. My mum always used to say, like, don't sit like a monkey when I was a child. So that's always in my head. I have to sit straight. That's such important points. Thank you so much, Giselle. I wonder if you can also talk a little bit more with us about, you know, the psychological aspects of, you know, what in science, the thing is we often have stress, but also one big stress is obviously also changing career or changing, for example, location. So these transition periods have a huge influence on, you know, not only us, but also our families, etc. And so all of this obviously leads to psychological stress. So could you maybe talk a little bit more about, you know, psychological stress in sciences and how that impacts people?
Well, there's nothing like change to stress someone out. So it's one thing that's definite in life, isn't it, is change. Because for one thing, you're going out of your comfort zone. You know, when we know where we are and what we're doing, then there's safety in that. So as soon as we start going outside of our comfort zone, and it can really start rising up different negative beliefs. And these beliefs can be very much entrenched in the person already. A lot of when I'm working with my clients in my therapeutic room, a lot of it is undoing all these negative beliefs that have been put in us from a very, very young age. So if you've got a fear of failure, or this fear of disappointing others, then having to make a change, depending on the reason for your change, could bring that out. Turning into something, if you thought career is totally altering, then that is a scary thing. You kind of know where you were and what you had to do and who you were within that, in that identity, in that field. And suddenly, if you're having to learn new things to do, meet new people, have to understand a whole new way of being within a new organisation, this can bring up fear of what others might think of you. That fear of failure can be quite intense, that learning new stuff. But also there's a sense of uncertainty. The brain is always looking out for certainty and to understand what's coming next. And also the thing you have to really take into consideration is what are the reasons behind the changes. Yeah, is the change because of a choice that's been made? Is it because that person wants to progress in their career? Is it because it's been outside of their own choice? So autonomy is such an important factor to when it comes to our own levels of stress. So if you've had to move because change jobs, say for example, the job that you really love doing, but it doesn't pay enough money to feed your family, say the cost of living crisis, then you have to move into another job because of those finances, or a lot of science jobs are reliant on funding. So if that funding suddenly stops or it's an end of a project, then that's going to create different stresses. So Tim earlier on was talking about all these lovely reasons why he's doing what he's doing. And you can tell his intrinsic motivation is a love of helping people, wanting to spread the information about all of these subjects that he's really interested about. Extrinsic motivation would be someone had said to him, well, what you have to do is you've got to share out all this information. But Tim didn't really like that, didn't like sharing information. He wants to hold on to it himself. Then he would start to feel really stressed about that. Extrinsic motivations can be, for example, other people's expectations on you, money, wanting to look good for someone else, whilst intrinsic motivation is very much connected to why you're doing it. And it's really important in any career that you do, is if you start to notice how your motivation is starting to reduce, because there's nothing ideal, is there? But if you can always come back to what is my intrinsic motivation here? So even for that person who had to move, what would the intrinsic motivation be there? It would be, I want to create a secure home for my family. I want to make sure that my children eat good food, or I want to make sure that we're living in an area where my children get good schooling, something like that, So suddenly the intrinsic motivation comes for the heart of the family, as opposed to the extrinsic motivation of having to leave because you can't afford the job. So the stress, hopefully at that point, would start to shift.
I think that's a really good point, like reframing your stressors, right? So kind of changing it from an extrinsic motivation to an intrinsic motivation might be a strategy. Sounds great. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think also one point that I would love to hear a little bit more about from you is you were talking about the negative beliefs. And I think one huge thing in sciences is imposter syndrome. A lot of us scientists feel like, not good enough and we're failing. And, there's a lot of rejection with peer-reviewed publications and grant applications and applying for jobs. And if you could talk a little bit more about, negative beliefs and how we could maybe, approach them on a more kind of daily basis, that would be great.
One of the things that's really, really useful is just to start becoming aware of our belief patterns. So that's an example that you saying about even using the word rejection. I've been rejected. I mean, that's quite a harsh word to use, isn't it? You could ask yourself, what am I believing right now? I'm believing I'm being rejected. And then you ask yourself, is that true? And can you 100% know that is true? So normally the answer is no, isn't it? Because you can't say it's all about you. It's possibly about their money, about other people who have applied for it, or other papers other people have written. And then you ask yourself, so by believing that, how is that impacting me? And then how different would this situation be if I wasn't believing this right now?
Yeah, I think unfortunately in science we often use really the word rejection. And now that you mention it, it is very negative. I never thought about it as such. So yes, maybe we should change that. And I think it's also, especially when you're early on in your career, you feel it obviously way more personal than later on. Because later on you understand it's the project, it's it's the wider scope of things. It's not just about you as a person. They don't think, oh, Elisabeth's research was rubbish. That's not what people, hopefully they don't think that. But yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important that kind of, your people that you work with they have kind of a positive outlook on that, right? Tim, now back to you. Sorry, we weren't going off on, things.
No, it was good. I was thinking of rejections that I'd had over the years as well. And, when you put your heart and soul into
yes.
a new product and you take your baby as you feel it to the powers that be, and they go, no, I don't think that's any good. No, I think I've spent months doing this. So yeah, I can fully sympathise with that feeling of rejection. But you've got to learn from it. You have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move forwards, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think now, kind of coming back to you, I would love to hear a little bit more about nutrition. I think we all kind of hear in the news a lot about, ultra processed foods and, organic foods, etc. And I think we know that it is so important for us on like our physical and mental health, like what we eat impacts us. Can you talk a little bit more about like, how really nutrition and food impact us and what can we do to have a good nutrition?
I mean, it was really interesting listening to Giselle talk before about intrinsic factors that motivations that create the need to, you're moving job because you want to give better nutrition to your family. Yes, that can be stressful, but actually that can also be helpful because poor nutrition really can have a devastating effect on how our bodies cope with the effects of stress. So maybe moving their job could have an invisible upside by decreasing the stress with better nutrition. Unfortunately, they say that 46% of people in a recent survey that they ate unhealthily due to stress, and 29% of those started drinking alcohol or increased their intake of it due to stress as well. So we tend to eat more unhealthily the more stressed we are. And as a consequence, we're unfortunately depriving our bodies of the nutrients that we need to help us get through those stressful periods. So there are a real core of nutrients that are particularly important. So vitamin C, the B vitamins, calcium, magnesium, they're all really important when we're stressed. And one of the problems here is that the body requires all those nutrients to properly handle stress. And poor diets tend to be very deficient in those things. So our ability to handle that stress is diminished as a consequence. So, for example, the adrenal glands, which support your production of your stress hormones, require a really good source of vitamin C and the B vitamins. The adrenal glands apparently have the highest amount of vitamin C in the body. So then when we're chronically stressed, even a great diet possibly is going to find it very difficult to keep up with demand for vitamin C, for example. The B vitamin is really important in producing those excitatory stress hormones during the stress response, and the calming chemicals that we've touched on earlier on. I know Giselle was talking about dopamine and things like that. All these wonderful brain chemicals that help to calm us down when the stress has gone. So diets which contain high levels of refined and processed foods, which are low in vitamins, and certain medications as well. So the medication omeprazole, which is used for acid indigestion, which is often taken by people that are stressed because their digestive systems go a little bit haywire. So that will also have issues with absorption of a vitamin, one of the B vitamins called B12. And deficiency is likely to be quite high in those individuals. So when we're under a lot of stress, constant stimulation of the adrenal glands, that also leads to the production of something called mineral corticoids, which in turn can cause blood losses of both calcium and magnesium, two really important nutrients in our body, very important for the growth of our skeleton, our nervous system function, etc. So we've also seen that in recent studies that sugar-laden, high-fat foods that we crave when we're stressed, so we reach for the chocolate bar or something in the belief that this is going to help us get through it, or if we're depressed, feeling low, that comfort eating is actually, unsurprisingly, the least likely to benefit our mental health. So instead of those type of foods, we really should be reaching for more vegetables, fruit, fish, eggs, nuts, seeds, beans, legumes, things like fermented foods like yogurt, etc. as well. And we hear a lot these days about fermented things like sauerkraut and kimchi. Those type of things really having a beneficial effect on our gut, on our gut health. And we think about the gut as being sort of a second brain. It really does help us to support the gut and consequently the fight against stress.
Such beautiful points. Thank you so much. I know I'm definitely guilty of going to the chocolate box,
Aren't we all?
whenever I'm stressed. Also, because you mentioned fermented foods, for our listeners, there is a podcast called Zoe, which has a really kind of very recent podcast about kimchi and sauerkraut and the gut-brain axis. So thanks for bringing that up, Tim. Definitely great points. And I think, healthy diet is so, so important. But as you mentioned, sometimes it's just, too tempting to say, have a chocolate. So maybe instead of the chocolate, next time we have some vegetables, like a carrot or something. Very good. Okay. I also hear that companies actually prohibit ultra-processed foods, right? Or ultra-processed snacks. Because definitely, like I say, I'm definitely guilty of going to like my cupboard and saying, I just have a quick chocolate just to boost me, in the afternoon. But actually, it turns out that quite a few companies prohibit these snacks and actually promote healthy eating habits. And I think, if big companies do that, they obviously have their reasons for doing so. But definitely a lot of things to untangle here. Tim, can you maybe talk a little bit more to us?
Brain fog, I think, is also worth mentioning at this point as well, which is a consequence of those long-term stresses. And it encompasses things like poor memory, lack of mental clarity, issues with concentration, with the mind wandering. Diet side of things, nutritionally, a diet low in omega-3 fatty acids or B vitamins, particularly B12, can certainly adversely affect your brain function. The omega-3 fatty acid, one called DHA, has been identified as really important for normal brain function. and tends to be very low in most of our diets, because if you exclude oily fish, there's not really many good sources of it. You can make it from lower members of the fatty acid chains, but it's not particularly effective. And so oily fish is a really good source of that particular fatty acid. Low levels of B12 really also linked to brain fog, and you only get a really good amount of B12 in animal products. So the vegan diet in particular can be really low in vitamin B12. So potentially is a good one for the vegans to add to their diet in supplemental form. I would personally go for a nice high potency B complex supplement to add to your daily routine. They're known as the anti-stress vitamins, and that's not for nothing, because they really do help your body cope with constant stress. The bacteria in your gut are also really important as well, helping your body get that clarity of mental thought as well. So for poor mental performance, anxiety and depression, working on that gut-brain axis can really help. So we talked a little before about fermented foods, and there's so many probiotics out there in the marketplace that specifically target this particular area, strengthening that gut-brain axis. So that's certainly something worth investigating as well to support your mental clarity.
Such great points. I think especially brain fog is something, again, where food has such a big impact. Thank you so much for sharing all these important facts with us. So one important aspect of stress management is to create an environment where we can prevent stress from happening, or for stress to have less of an impact on us. And Giselle, you already talked with us a little bit about, how we can reframe, how we see stress and how we can cope with it. But I would love for you to talk a little bit more about, how can individuals maintain a work-life balance, and especially when we navigate, science and, our careers, and why this so-called work-life balance is so important for our mental health.
I struggle a little bit with that phrase, work-life balance, because our work is our life as well. And I think it complicates things. It's sort of, what does that mean? And then sometimes work takes over a bit more, and then our personal life takes over a little bit more. So one thing that I'd like to turn to with this type of subject is, I wish I could say this was mine, but it's absolutely not. Dr. Dan Siegel and David Rock created the Healthy Mind Platter for optimal brain matter. And I really like this, because what it really shows is what we need to be including every single day within our life. So they talk about sleep time. So getting really good quality sleep is absolutely fundamental. Having physical time, so moving our bodies. If we can, if you're physically able to do so, get your heart pumping, get some strengthening happening, get a bit of sweat on. Have a bit of focus time. So this is when you're really focused in what you're doing, which I imagine there's an awful lot of that within science careers. Connecting time, ensuring that we're connecting with people that we get, they get us. So that really comfortable connecting time is really fundamental for our stress levels. Playtime. Now, this is something as adults we often miss out. How often do we just play? Play is an amazing way to reduce our stress level. Getting some downtime. Downtime doesn't mean just sitting on our phones. Downtime means, how is it that we're able to relax and just allow our system to disconnect. And the interesting thing is, when we have downtime, our brain is still working. So often those problems that we're a bit stuck on, we have downtime, if we go for a walk in nature, our brain doesn't stop. And also time in. So that is meditation. That's really focusing in on our body sensations, just really being present with ourselves. So if we're able to ensure that we're bringing all of these different factors within our life, then we should be getting that right balance within our existence.
That was beautiful examples. Thank you so much. We'll share this in the show notes, but it is called Dan Siegel's Healthy Mind Platter. And I love especially the point about play, because I think, especially during the COVID pandemic, we all started, jigsaws and card games and Monopoly. So I think we all kind of relearned how important, play and downtime is.
So it's a great way to connect and attach with people when you're playing.
Absolutely. Except for Monopoly, because that's divorce reason.
No, I just walk off. I just get bored. What's going on?
Yeah. Oh, so great. Thank you. So Tim, you've been obviously in the industry for a very long time, and so 32 years, you have lived experience. You had a lot of stress and long-term kind of resilience. So you have this, know-how on how to cope with high-pressure scientific roles. Can you maybe give us a few examples on how you dealt with all of these situations in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim that I was always good at this, but I learned over a period of time, this is the way that it worked for me. So it was all down to organization, goal setting, learning to manage others' expectations, and building in a little bit of me time as well. And I know we've touched on that before. So always found that making a task list was really good, and prioritizing those tasks on that list and doing them one by one. I've never been able to multitask. I actually personally think it's a really good thing. I can't multitask, because when you switch from one task to another, we're actually less efficient in every sense. The response times are slower because we place increased demands on our neurocognitive systems. The support sustained attention, and as a consequence, our performance suffers. So that's really key, is to try and do one thing and do it well. It's also simple things. I used to clear my desk at the end of the day as well. Whatever I was doing, it all went away, so that when I arrived for work the following morning, it was to a nice, calm, relaxed, organized workstation and not a chaotic one. And I found that those things really did help to create a feeling of calmness, and it wasn't coming into lots of stressful situations, work all over my desk, people wanting to get a hold of me all the time.
That's such, words to live by. Do one thing and do it well. I definitely, I should do that more often. I think it's also like this 20-minute rule, right? If you task switch, it takes you up to 20 minutes to regain focus. You had a beautiful kind of way of putting this, like the neurocognitive load, right? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the increased demands on our neurocognitive systems support sustained attention. So that's what we're trying to do, is lessen that neurocognitive load by single tasking and doing it well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, do not talk and write at the same time, but you can watch TV and iron. That's fine. Okay, yeah, good. We're kind of starting to wrap up a little bit. And so I would love to hear some kind of last words, wrapping up, final thoughts from maybe Giselle, if we can start. What's your last thoughts for our listeners?
Oh, lovely. Thank you. Well, so much, isn't there? So really be able to focus on your mindset. Where are you coming from? Is it from a fixed mindset where it's all just about the end result and whether you've passed or failed? Or is this an opportunity to see how you can grow and develop? And just recognizing that resilience grows during those tougher times, and how we face those and how we're able to work our way through it. Life is about experiencing, life is about developing. And by experiencing these more challenging times, sets us up for times ahead as well. So maybe next time you can make even a bigger move, because you proved yourself that you can do this one. And our overall health improves as well when we're in that growth mindset, and we're really sort of pushing ourselves and challenging ourselves, but seeing it as a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. How we perceive stress can make such a difference on how it impacts our bodies. So if we're very much looking at it from, this is really awful, this is really bad, then our bodies are going to have a bigger impact than, oh wow, actually this is showing me that I'm developing, which is showing me that I'm growing. I always think that if you're able to look at life with curiosity and see life as possibility that lies ahead of you, then any experience that we have is going to be taken with that little bit of excitement, as opposed to taking it with fear and dread.
Tim, anything that you still want to add to our listeners? Any kind of final words to them?
Yeah, I'd just love to say that I think sleep is very much underrated when it comes to stress as well, and quality of sleep. So we use an analogy about the stress bucket, and that fills up with the day's stresses, but the stress bucket can be easily emptied by a good night's sleep. So And making sure that we get a good night's sleep can really help us cope with stress. So whatever techniques you need to end up with a good night's sleep, or there's some great food supplements as well. I personally love valerian, but also things like magnesium are really good, 5-HTP, passiflora. There's some really fantastic herbs and minerals for stress, and really helps to get yourself a good night's sleep.
Thank you so much. That's great kind of last final insights, especially sleep. I'm an advocate for sleep. I love sleep. Thank you both again, Giselle Monbiot and Tim Gaunt, for your really more than valuable insights. And it was great to have you both here and discussing with each other. I think today we not only learned about stress and, mental health of stress and nutrition in stress, but also really valuable kind of coping mechanisms. And I think it was also beautiful to really hear that all of us have these little, techniques, mental health techniques, but also nutrition techniques can help us overcome stress and cope with stress. And so again, if you haven't yet, make sure to follow Giselle Monbiot and Tim Gaunt. Check out the websites, but also they're both on LinkedIn, so give them a follow. Again, Giselle's website has a lot of very valuable information, and Tim has this beautiful blog on LinkedIn where he regularly shares with us really insightful nutrition information. So for us now from Keep It Science, I really want to thank all of you for listening to us today. You can follow us on Twitter as well as on LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you with any topics and ideas that you want to talk with us about. And the email address for this is keepitscience@gmail.com. You can listen to this podcast on Google, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to this right now. And with this, I would like to thank our listeners today for joining us at Keep It Science, talking about stress.
This podcast is sponsored by GiselleMonbiot.com, the site of therapist, coach and wellbeing specialist Giselle Monbiot. With a proven track record of guiding individuals, business and educational sectors to overcome the hurdles that they may face, professionally and personally, visit the website to learn more about how to enjoy the 4 core pillars of Giselle's practice: clarity, openness, resilience and energy. Learn more at GiselleMonbiot.com.